So it's an interesting question.
How did we get here?
How did we get here? Well, let's see. That was my mom and my dad.
We
um,
we met 40 over 40 years ago now,
yeah,
or just about 40 years ago, at the University of California at Santa Cruz.
right. And I was kind of coming from a place. We both grew up in the San Francisco
That's
Bay
right.
Area.
Both half Irish.
Both went to all boys Catholic high schools. We're still in recovery.
Exactly.
Um, but you know, we were coming out of a place, the late 60s, where there was so much revolution or possibility
Exactly.
or change in the air. And so we were sort of riding this question with a
Yeah.
lot of people, what kind of world can we
We create.
create where, to use that phrase from NLPU, to which you would want
Want
to
to
belong?
belong. Yeah, and I think to me a big part of that story is, of course, we've met each other through first connection with Richard Bandler and John Grinder, who were co-founding neurolinguistic programming at that time, and then through our also very important mutual mentors, and I think for both of us, sort of our spiritual mentors, Milton Erickson and Gregory Bateson.
Right.
So we had this a very sort of a common set of influences that then we took in different directions.
Yeah. I think, for me, the first really generative idea is that I got, especially from Erickson, was there's a place that you can go to inside
Mm,
where you can let go of all your worries, you can
mm,
let go of all your problems, and you can feel this place of creative intelligence.
mm,
And to be introduced to that by this, great, amazing guy, Milton Erickson, was just so
mm.
revolutionary for me, and it was just something that I thought, well, that's what I
Yeah.
want to pass on to people.
And actually, as you're saying that, I was also really thinking of the complement to that that I got from, and I think both of us got from Bateson, where this larger aesthetic, systemic view that it is through difference of perspective, that it's actually through things that seem to be different or contradicting each other, that something really creative can also emerge. So there's sort of both this inner aspect and this outer aspect.
Hmm.
And I think those are both very, very deep in the DNA of both of us.
Yeah,
Then we went in different directions. I kind of got very much clearly into the foundations and the spreading of NLP, and setting up some of the certification programs, and then continuing on in developing, writing a number of books on that, taking it into different professions, leadership, health, innovation, etc. And you went on a parallel but a different path.
right. And Robert, I mean, we're talking about differences. One of the main differences, maybe
Mm,
for the purposes of distinction, you say that what you were doing in NLP was concentrating maybe a little bit more on the specifics of
yeah,
how you can create things
right.
out in the world.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
maybe had a little bit more emphasis on how you can let go and trust this
Yeah,
inner intelligence
yeah,
inside.
yeah.
Do you think that
I
would
think
be
so. I think
roughly
this,
fair?
I think there's other things. Okay, NLP is kind of more working from these kind of cognitive strategies. You could say it goes, it certainly embraces and acknowledges the right brain, but it sort of starts from the left brain.
Right.
And I think your work was all starting from the
Yeah.
body, the right brain. I mean, so it kind of came to the body through the
Right.
head, and you came
Right.
through the sort of creative unconscious, and which was then really great when we met and started the corpus callosum
Yeah.
of generative change.
Long live the bridge. And
And we re-met, I think, also at a very key time in both of our lives when we were both new fathers of daughters.
new fathers. Yeah. Yeah. I never thought we'd be saying, "Oh, you remember the days when we were in school? Now look at us. We've got kids." But out of that, it seems to be one of the core emergent strands that laid the foundation for IAGC was this sort of growing conversation about how do you integrate those two languages,
Yeah.
maybe say the NLP language and the Ericksonian language, which, in the Bandler Grinder, where they call it sort of the meta model and the Milton
And Milton
model.
model, exactly.
How do you integrate those to get a sort of a higher level, a third form of something that we have come to call generative?
Yeah, and first of all, I think part of what happened too is that I think is important in our story, in our history, is that there were many students of Erickson, many students of Bandler and Grinder. However, I mean, one of the things I remember before we even came together again, I was constantly hearing about you from other people. Oh, here's what Steve Gilligan's doing. He's creating this. He's doing that. And I think while we were very honoring of our legacies and where the traditions from where we came from, we were both also inherently generative in what we were doing, right? So there was that sense that we were also continuing to create beyond the limits of the legacy from which we came. And so I think that was actually something that we both shared. So yes, on the one hand, there was always this interest in the integration of these two things. But I think the reason that we've really coalesced around generative change is because that's actually what is the flame that's in both of us.
Yeah. And another way of saying that is, I think both of us came to the awareness over time that the underlying context that our different work was situated in was a relational context where the professional was somehow sort of at a meta level, and that we were seeing the much greater value of a collaborative model, where of course you have different social roles, and those are different. If I'm going to be the coach, it's different than I'm going to be a client. But at the same time, that we're seeing creativity as really requiring a conversation between the professional on the one side and the client on the other side, so that collaborative nature, I think, was one of the things that led us to IAGC.
Yeah, and I think just maybe as the most recent part of this story, over the last 10 years, as we continued to work together, and at first it was kind of like, oh, we're interested in what each other's doing, and we'd kind of, you'd present something, I present something around a particular theme, but as we did that more and more, then things came out of that wasn't like, okay, I'm bringing my thing or your perspective, but it's like, actually, this is our perspective, and this is actually touching a deeper structure. And I think from all of our mentors, but from the Erickson and Bateson, really that honoring of these kind of deeper, creative, generative structures that can then take many, many forms. And I think that's part of why we really, I think, sort of came together over specifically the notion of generative change.
And that notion of generative then is about what, practically speaking, what are the conditions, what are the mind-body conditions, what are the relational connection traditions, where something can emerge out of that had never been imagined before, never thought possible. Partly we've got Bateson's influence there about more of a systemic mind understanding. It seems that what has emerged as IAGC is really has a lot to do with this notion of this conversation, that creativity comes from this careful connection between a conversation of differences, between Steve and Robert, or between the cognitive and the somatic, between what we look at as the goal and the problem, between the sort of verbal and the nonverbal, and that seems to be something that we created together, interestingly, as a core of IAGC, and it's part of, to me, what the excitement is that still, I mean, when I'm exploring this, years into it, I get more and more excited about
Yeah,
it
same here.
because it's not clear from that idea exactly how it's going to happen.
Yeah,
Only that we're looking for differences and seeing how to have a type of connection between the
yeah,
differences and then wait for the mini miracles, so to
yeah.
speak.
And I would say, for me, I think two of the key things that have also really characterized what has come out, one is sort of notion of sponsorship, and the other is the notion of field. And I think those are really
Right.
distinct from other forms of things that try to do what we do, but that are just different. Um, and then I think just the last part of our story is then really where IAGC it came from is from other people. It wasn't kind of just us going, "Hey, let's do this thing." People started asking, "Well, what we want more of what you're doing together. How can we get that?" And it's not just what's individual. And I think that was part of what awakened in us this realization that, hey, this really is not just this weaving together of one thing and the other thing. That really this third entity has emerged, and
In today's times, we see all of these differences sort of smashing against each other. Look at the refugee situation in Europe as an example. I was just thinking of today, and we see in the generative change work
yeah,
the possibility,
exactly.
of what it would mean to bring those differences together
Together,
so that something new
you
could
can.
come out of it.
Let's keep doing it.